A father and his two sons struggle to survive in a world overrun by ferocious nocturnal creatures that prey on all living souls each night. Welcome back to Movies Explained. Today's film is an action horror film from 2024 titled Arcadian. The movie begins with Paul searching for supplies to escape the apparent end of civilization when suddenly sirens start wailing. He rushes out, navigating the streets carefully, hiding where necessary, and keeping away from explosives. As the city fills with black smoke, Paul finds refuge in an abandoned house on the outskirts of town where he reunites with his twin infant boys. He cradles them, reassuring them that they will be safe. The scene changes to 15 years later, and Paul's boys are now healthy teenagers. They live in the same house and go out during the day to gather supplies, but they remain indoors at night. As soon as the sun begins to set, Joseph covers the windows and instructs their dog Rocco to enter the house. Paul waits outside till Tom returns, and then scolds him for being late. Tom shares that he takes pleasure in assisting their neighbors, the Rose family, who run a farm nearby. They all make sure that every door and window is securely locked before sitting down for dinner. Paul continues to scold Tom, warning him that if he arrives late again, he will not be allowed to leave the premises. During a light-hearted moment, Joseph teases Tom about spending too much time at the Rose farm, which quickly escalates into a physical altercation. Paul steps in to break up the fight, reminding them that they are not animals. Later, as Paul watches his sons play chess, he is suddenly distracted by Rocco, who begins clawing and snarling at the floor. Sensing trouble, Paul and Tom head downstairs, only to be startled by an unexpected loud banging on the door. It appears that the creatures are trying to break in, so Paul and his sons quickly brace against the door to prevent them from forcing their way through. There's intense shaking and hammering for a few seconds before the creatures eventually give up and leave. Afterward, Tom accuses Joseph of not helping, but Joseph explains that he is listening closely to understand the attackers' behavior better. According to Joseph, there were 3 distinct attempts. The first lasted 10 seconds, the second 20, and the third just 1 second. He theorizes that the first was a probing test, the second a genuine attempt to breach the door, and the third merely an outburst of frustration. The next day, they inspect the door and find it marred with claw marks. The door has weakened significantly due to the violent attacks and an infestation. As a result, Paul and his sons set out to find wood for repairs. They return home with the necessary materials, and while Thomas cuts the wood, Paul checks on Joseph, who has been busy in the barn. After Paul's constant probing, Joseph explains that he has been attempting to build a vehicle because he is tired of feeling restricted and scared. However, he is unable to make it work. Paul is impressed and takes a look, immediately making modifications that eventually get the car running. Excited, Paul takes the teenagers for a ride to teach them how to drive. After an hour of traveling, they return home, and Paul notes that the windows still need reinforcing. He instructs the boys to head to the river to gather materials. Thomas is frustrated because he had planned to visit the farm today, where he has a secret crush on Charlotte. However, Paul insists that fortifying their home is more urgent. Reluctantly, the 2 brothers set off in the car. Almost immediately, Thomas accuses Joseph of being the reason Paul sent them both, suggesting that Paul thinks Thomas needs protection. As they drive past the farm, Thomas exits the car and tells Joseph to pick him up on the return trip, asserting that he doesn't think he needs protection. At home, Paul finishes reinforcing the door and then stops by the waterfall for a smoke. As he relaxes, he notices a dark, ominous hole in the nearby rocks. Meanwhile, Joseph crosses the river, secures himself to the vehicle, and ventures into an old abandoned ship to look for supplies. He is startled when he finds a pinup from a dirty magazine inside a locker. Peeking further inside, Joseph is horrified as a swarm of beetles bursts from a pile of trash. The insects start swarming around him, trying to land on his skin, forcing him to make a quick escape. Meanwhile, Thomas arrives at the farm and starts helping with the chores. However, it soon becomes evident that his real interest is spending time with Charlotte, the owner's daughter. The teenagers walk across the field together, obviously infatuated with one another. Charlotte explains to Thomas that she used to be only allowed to play outside if she was in contact with the tree, so she'd tie herself up to give herself more room to run while remaining linked to the tree. They also entertain each other, with wild theories about what might have caused the apocalypse. When it's time for Thomas to leave, Charlotte gives him a tight hug. The sun is beginning to set, and the boys need to hurry. Back at home, Paul grows anxious when he arrives to find only their dog Rocco. Neither of his sons is there. Joseph returns to the car and struggles to start it, but after several attempts, it finally ignites. Meanwhile, Thomas is running as fast as he can to get home, but he trips and falls into a gap in the ground. Joseph doesn't find his brother and continues on his way when he stops by to pick him up. When he gets home and tells his father what happened, Paul asks him to enter the house and lock up while he and Rocco search for Thomas. Meanwhile, Thomas regained consciousness in the gap with a very aching body. He looks around the area with a lighter and gets scared to see something reaching through a hole in the wall. Even worse, Paul and Rocco hear it screeching. Thomas carefully takes a little dagger, stabs the monster in the hand, and the creature retreats into the hole. But as Thomas attempts to escape, another creature grabs his face from above. Thomas was having difficulty breathing, but just as he was about to pass out, Paul arrived on the scene and killed the monster instantly, pulling it away from them. After checking on Thomas to make sure he was okay, Paul and Rocco discovered a tunnel that led directly into the gap. Since it was too dangerous to run through the forest at night, they decided to stay in the gap until daylight, blocking the entrance to protect themselves from any potential danger. They could hear the animals coming through the hole and prepare to flare, but suddenly the ground began to shake. It turned out that the monsters had moved underground, trapping them in the gap and blocking the exit with dirt, leaving them with no way out. Rocco is barking loudly while the ground continues to rumble. Paul decides to insert a flare into the ground and asks his son and the dog to move back. Paul accidentally triggers a small explosion that injures him, and the creatures underground start to emerge. Meanwhile, Joseph hears strange noises in the house and prepares himself by tying a rope to his chair and sitting in front of the door. A creature reaches inside the door, but Joseph pulls the rope to reveal that he was only pretending to be asleep. The creature is captured in a cage that falls from the ceiling, and Joseph covers it with a blanket full of pride. Concerned about his family, who have not returned, Joseph leaves in his car to search for them the next day. Thomas manages to rescue his injured father by digging through the collapsed ground and opening an entrance. Rocco, eager to help, follows the sound of Joseph's car to try to locate him and lead him back to the family. Right away, the brothers work together to get Paul into the car and then to his bed in the house. The thing goes insane as they debate what to do next. Eventually, Thomas finds the cage and looks under the blanket. After quickly putting the blanket back, Joseph explained that light harms the creature. Next, they tended to Paul's wounds. Joseph informed them that the creature was able to enter their home in just 8 seconds, the fastest it had ever done so. He also suspected that a second creature had disappeared. Joseph realized that something was off, as their behavior was changing too quickly. Thomas noted that the creatures seemed to possess intelligence. Joseph, however, believes that it was Paul alone who killed the animals, not the group collectively. To prove his courage, Thomas attempts to kill the beast trapped in a cage. Joseph intervenes, wanting to study the creature, but it escapes and quickly hides under the bed. When it eventually reappears, Rocco barks at it, prompting the monster to transform and attack. Joseph runs to hold it down, and Thomas uses an axe to chop off its head. Joseph, eager to discover more, takes the body to the barn and begins opening it up while Rocco and a swarm of bugs watch him. But despite his efforts, he gains no insight into what the creature really is. Thomas then suggests that they move Paul to Charlotte's farm, which offers a better house and actual medication. Joseph is skeptical that the roses will help, but Thomas convinces him to try. The brothers place Paul back in the car and head to the farm, where Charlotte's parents confirm Joseph's fears. They explain that they do not have enough medicine to spare and refuse to take in someone with such severe injuries. Charlotte objects to their decision, but is overruled. However, there could be more resources available at their own home if Charlotte's parents would allow Thomas to stay. Shortly after arriving at the farm, Joseph decides to leave, frustrated. Thomas chases after him, and a heated argument ensues. Joseph blames Thomas for their father's critical condition, leading to a physical altercation, where Thomas, overcome with anger, throws Joseph to the ground and begins to choke him. Still, he stops himself when he realizes what he's done. After quickly getting into the car and leaving with his unconscious father, Joseph returns to the family property. Meanwhile, Thomas enjoys a delicious meal prepared by Charlotte, who also shares some of her personal belongings that he has never seen before. Their intimate moment is interrupted by a kiss, which is abruptly cut short when Charlotte's father enters and directs her to another room. On his way back, Joseph notices the sheep running in terror and sees heaps of mud around the property, suggesting that some animals might be moving underground. When he arrives home, a trail of dirt near the wall raises his suspicions that monsters might be hiding beneath the house. Determined to protect his family, Joseph heads to the barn to gather supplies for a new plan and starts securing the house by blocking all the windows. As he moves across the house, he trips over carpets and falls, discovering a hole under the structure. This confirms his worst fears. The monsters have already infiltrated the house. Charlotte discovers Thomas poking around the kitchen at the property. He wants to get some medicine and go since he is still concerned about his father. Unaware that someone could overhear them, he gives Charlotte a hug in appreciation and tells her he will return when she gives him the medication. Thomas dashes outside, but before he can reach the gate, a farm worker pulls a revolver, accusing him of theft. Despite Thomas's desperate assertions that Charlotte had given him the item, the man does not believe him. The staff members then escort Thomas to the barn, where they tie him up and play loud music to drown out the sounds of the abuse they plan to inflict. As they grab Thomas's legs and a man prepares to shoot, the ground suddenly gives way beneath him. He stumbles and misses the shot. A beast emerges from the newly formed hole, distracting the other men as they rush to assist their colleague. Meanwhile, Charlotte's parents are awakened by the commotion in the main house. As the father lights a candle to investigate, a creature bursts into the room and attacks. In the chaos, the candle falls and quickly ignites a fire. The mother escapes to look for Charlotte while the father struggles with the creature. Before she can get far, the beast pounces on her. It then shakes, transforming into another form, and begins to douse the woman with a mysterious substance. Unaware of the unfolding tragedy, Charlotte is in her bedroom when she hears her parents being attacked. When the noises stop, Charlotte ventures out and is horrified to find a trail of blood. She follows it to the bathroom, where she discovers the creature carrying her mother's body on its back. Back at the barn, the men try to fend off the beasts, but are quickly overwhelmed. One by one, they are killed. And as more creatures continue to appear, the situation becomes increasingly dire. Shortly thereafter, the barn catches fire. Thomas manages to topple the furniture to which he is tied and breaks the wood to free his hands. Just as a beast spots him, Charlotte intervenes, shooting it down before it can attack. The teenagers then flee, and Thomas notices the house is on fire. Deciding on their next move, Charlotte informs Thomas that her parents have died, and they decide to head to Thomas's house. Meanwhile, Joseph tries to delay the creatures by filling the hole with furniture. After ensuring his unconscious father is safe with a quick check and a kiss on the forehead, Joseph prepares to defend their home. Just as he braces for more creatures, the door opens, but it's only Thomas and Charlotte arriving. Paul awakens, interrupting Joseph and expressing his need for Thomas's help. After quickly taking some medication, Paul rallies his sons to continue the fight. Joseph shares his plan with the group, and they scour the barn for as many gas cans as they can find, using Rocco's constant barking as a warning of danger. The group also moves an old freezer into the house to fortify their defenses. Thomas and Charlotte work on securing each window that still has glass, while Joseph builds a mound of furniture doused in gasoline. He places every explosive device he can find on top, along with one of his father's slowly burning cigarettes. Suddenly, the pile covering the hole begins to shake, just as a creature descends through the chimney into the room with Paul. Another creature emerges from the hole, and Thomas quickly stabs it as it passes a door. The creature retaliates, but Thomas grabs his dagger and stabs it in the head, killing it. When a third creature attempts to attack Charlotte, she reacts quickly and shoots it down. After regrouping with Joseph, the two begin to move the freezer again, when the door behind them swings open to reveal Paul, now awake and covered in blood from killing the creature that came down the chimney. Taking Charlotte's gun, Paul fires at the floor, aiming to hit the creatures lurking below. Soon, a massive swarm appears in the hallway and starts moving toward him. Paul kicks the first creature, causing it to tremble, and the combined weight of the creatures causes most of them to collapse through the weakened floor. Amazed by the trio's effective cooperation, Paul watches as they quickly eliminate the remaining monsters before they can pose any further threat. The three teenagers, along with Rocco, then rush to the freezer for safety. Paul stays behind to buy them some time, closing the door behind him instead of following. As he braces for the final stand, Paul reminisces about the day he held his babies close and reassured them that everything would be all right. Meanwhile, the group hides inside the freezer, seeking refuge from the chaos outside. Paul keeps the approaching wave of creatures at bay by distracting them until the pile of furniture rigged with explosives detonates, causing the entire house to collapse and catch fire. The freezer, acting as their makeshift shelter, runs for a few minutes while the house burns around them. As the freezer eventually stops, the kids emerge and quickly search through the rubble for Paul, only to be startled by a beast leaping out from the debris. The group hurriedly gets into the car and drives off as a fire-breathing monster chases them. When the monster gets close enough, Charlotte fires at it, causing it to crumble since her bullets are ineffective against it. After driving a few kilometers, the group pulls over to gaze at the stars, an activity they had never experienced before due to their nocturnal confinement. Upon returning to the remnants of their home the next morning, they decide they have no desire to rebuild the same structure. They bid their final goodbyes and bury their loved ones, salvaging whatever supplies they can find. The movie concludes as the three teenagers, along with Rocco, drive towards one of the farms farther down the valley, hopeful for a new beginning. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe for more videos.